the Coulter Cast. I'm Chris Stachio, and I am joined by the man among animals, the smarmy smarmster, the smug bug in a rug, the host of the projection booth, Mike White.
Thank you for having me on, Chris. I appreciate it.
What the fuck? What? No joke? No nothing?
No, I was going to go for I am not an animal, I'm a human being, but, I mean, it's played out.
Yeah.
It's played out.
Is it? Okay, I had never seen this movie before, so...
Oh, really? It's even in, like, one of the Naked Gun movies, I believe.
Yeah. Well, now when I hear that in Naked Gun, I will know what it is from. So Mike is joining me to kick off our first film of David Lynch December. This is a follow-up to David Lynch January that we did a couple years back. This is going to round out all of the auteur's films with a look at the auteur's second film, The Elephant Man.
Life is full of surprises. Consider the fate of this creature's poor mother. Struck down in the 4th month of her maternal condition by an elephant, a wild elephant. The result is plain to see. Ladies and gentlemen, the terrible elephant man.
Are your parents still alive? Do you understand me? Your father, your mother, are they dead?
Hello, my name is John Merrick. I'm very pleased to meet you.
I'm very pleased to meet you, Mr. Merrick.
I just realized I'm not used to being treated so well by a beautiful woman.
Can you imagine the kind of life you must have had?
My treasure. I gave you the freak on trust. And now I want him back.
You do not own this man! Now stop it!
We have a sacred duty to cure the sick, not care for circus animals.
I am not an elephant! I am not an animal! I am a human being!
Oh, Mr. Merrick, you're not an elephant man at all.
I wish I could sleep like normal people. Can you cure me?
The auteur. Ooh.
He is an auteur, is he not?
Yeah, I agree.
He is an auteur. The American auteur who doesn't bitch about comic book movies, David Lynch. So the film is directed by David Lynch, written by Christopher DeVore, Eric Berggren, and David Lynch. Stars Anthony Hopkins, John Hurt, and Anne Bancroft. And if you don't know what the movie's about, it's about John Hurt playing John. In the movie, he's called John. His real name was Joseph Merrick, a man who was heavily disfigured. They still technically don't know what it was that caused him to be disfigured. They have some theories, and we'll get into kind of the reality versus the fiction that the movie presents. And he is a disfigured man who is taken in by a doctor played by Anthony Hopkins. And the Anthony Hopkins character shows him some kindness, and it's a good, touching story But before I ask you, Mike, what you thought of the film, I will, line up 2 questions back to back. What did you think of the movie? And are you as perplexed as I am as to why David Lynch is the one who directed this movie?
Well, actually, I'm not that perplexed because of the Mel Brooks connection.
Right, but you know what I mean, talking about, like, the film itself is so un-Lynchian.
Right, though I had forgotten just those moments of Lynchness, and then there are just little things peppered throughout.
It's like 3 things that are the Lynch things in the movie.
Well, even when Hopkins is going through the alleyways, and there's just a guy standing in the alley who looks like he's about to tip over because maybe he's drunk. I mean, it just reminded me of the man in the yellow coat from Blue Velvet. And there are just little hints of stuff, and especially the whole Industrial Revolution period of England and the dirt and the smoke and the noise. I mean,
it's
Alan
Eraserhead adjacent.
It is so Eraserhead adjacent, and then especially the end when there's the star field, and I'm doing quotes from Dune, and then we see the circle, and I'm like, okay, this is like episode 8 of Twin Peaks: The Return. There are so many Lynch touches, but this is as straight, other than maybe the Straight Story, as Lynch has ever played it, as much of this movie that there is.
In heaven, everything is fine, including the Elephant Man. But it for me, like you said, I haven't seen the Straight Story yet. We're going to talk about it later this month, so I'll take your word for it right now. But of the things I've seen of David Lynch, which is, I think, everything but Wild at Heart, Mulholland Drive, and The Straight Story. Wow, you are in for a treat, sir. This is the most straightforward, narratively speaking film that I have ever seen by David Lynch. It is, I'm not going to say there's nothing to it, but it is a very straightforward biopic. It is a straightforward telling of this man's life. Obviously, if you do some research, which any good podcaster should, I did a fair amount of research this afternoon about Joseph Merrick, who's called John for whatever reason. I guess in Frederick Trevis's book, he calls him John. For whatever reason, he changes his name. They don't know why, but I mean, obviously his account of his interactions with Joseph Merrick, the Elephant Man, and other reminiscences is very much a romanticized version of his life, which obviously this film is a very much romanticized retelling of this man's life. It's an interesting movie because, again, it doesn't feel David Lynch. Like, outside of it being black and white and those weird kind of surrealistic things barely peppered in, it's very straightforward. And I like that about this movie because I don't think it would have worked as a traditional David Lynch film to tell the story about this guy's life. Right? I don't know. Maybe not.
The thing, about Merrick himself, that Merrick is a very Lynchian character, and to see, that Lynch loves nuclear explosions. Like, if you look at Twin Peaks: The Return and other things, like there's a nuclear explosion in Twin Peaks: The Return. There are pictures of nuclear explosions in Gordon Cole's office, and I heard Lynch on a interview one time, and he was talking about how tumors are like slowed down nuclear explosions. So all those tumors on the back of John Merrick look like little atom bombs that have gone off, and just they're in stasis. And just the way that his face is and all of that just puts him in that Lynch category to me. Just always the outsider. We see a giant and a little person in this movie, several little people, and I'm just like, okay, again, I'm thinking Twin Peaks, and just always looking at the outsiders and using bodies to tell a story.
Well, and one of the little people is Kenny Baker, who plays R2-D2 in Star Wars, which I know he's been in other things, but always very welcome to see him. Also, Dexter Fletcher is in this movie. Again, he was in, what was the last thing I saw him in? Something. I know he's in Bugsy Malone, which we're going to be watching next year. And
you're so excited to talk about that one, I know.
And, he directed Rocket Man. and he's uncredited on Bohemian Rhapsody, bringing up once again fucking Bryan Singer, because of course, but Dexter Fletcher plays the little boy that frees John Merrick, and essentially is the kind of the catalyst for the entire movie. Is Dexter Fletcher, which is great. I mean, he's a fantastic child actor. He's a great actor and now a director. But yeah, there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of shared imagery that we see in a lot of Lynch's later works, which is interesting because, again, I would think, for me, if I'm going to show someone who's not a cinemaniac or a astute cinema watcher like you or I, someone who watches a lot of film, if I was going to show them something that was David Lynch that they would be able to process more easily, I would show them this.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, again, I haven't seen The Straight Story, but this, like, most people know who the Elephant Man is on top of everything else.
Right. Even if they only know him as Michael Jackson wanted to buy his skeleton, or at least that was the rumor.
Right. Sure. But I think the other thing about this movie that I find interesting is the addition of Christopher DeVore and Eric Berggren. I think almost everything that we've seen up until this point, or, you know, not with Lynch, but everything I've seen up until this point with Lynch, except for Dune, is like David Lynch all the way, or Mark Snow, you know, having his hands in it. But most of David Lynch's films are like pretty much he is the driving force. And you can see in this film where he's not the driving force. And you can see where his parts are. And it's so weird because it's like almost director for hire in a way, but not. And that's strange to be talking about a David Lynch movie that way.
Well, we have to remember this was his second movie after Eraserhead. Right. So he went back to just a manual labor job after this. I mean, he had to pay the bills, and he didn't think that anyone's going to come, you know, pounding on his door to do anything else after this, after Eraserhead. That was kind of the passion project. And yeah, it was kind of remarkable that he managed to do anything else.
Well, and let's not forget, so this movie, David Lynch's second film, it is nominated for 8 Academy Awards. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Actor. And this movie is the reason we have a Best Makeup and Hairstyling award category. I mean, it didn't win any of the ones that matter.
Right.
It didn't win anything, correct? It didn't win anything, which is a fucking shame, considering how John Hurt is unrecognizable. And that makeup, as kind of probably bad as it would have looked filmed in color, filming it in black and white was such a smart move.
Yeah.
Like, the smartest thing that Lynch did in my mind was filming it in black and white.
And again, I can see where Brooks probably supported that idea, having just made, I know it was probably about 4 years prior to this, but having just made Young Frankenstein in black and white, and he had to have that fight. So he probably knew, you know, the importance of shooting something in black and white, especially, to your point, how bad is it going to look if it's in color, and then also really putting it in that period of that Industrial Revolution.
And also keeping in line with Eraserhead. Eraserhead is black and white. You've got this in black and white, so there's that kind of also weird through line.
Exactly.
But, so the Mel Brooks thing is funny. So, for those of you that don't know, Mel Brooks produced this movie. Kept his name off of the production because he didn't want people to think it was a comedy. He also did that with one of my favorite movies, The Fly, which I find just so funny that, like, that when you, I guess people just were conditioned to think Mel Brooks comedy, couldn't do it. It's like, well, just because he's producing it, like, good God, yes, he could not produce anything and it not be a comedy. Jesus, come on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was, Stuart Kornfeld was with him on this, who also produced The Fly, and really the Mel Brooks and Anne Bancroft, Brooks's wife, really helped him get his start in things. Then he's been, he went on to do a whole bunch of stuff, including one of your favorite films, Chris, which was Tropic Thunder. Stuart Kornfeld produced that. I
mean, I do like Tropic Thunder. I don't know if you're being facetious or...
I am not being facetious because I enjoy that movie quite a bit. Okay. He also did things like Zoolander, and he actually even produced Soderbergh's Kafka. So he's kind of moved from like more art house films into more mainstream public kind of stuff. But yeah, he's a great guy.
And look what we have because of it. So I don't know how you feel about this, but I don't know where this ranks for me in David Lynch's canon because it does feel so different.
Yeah, it's not necessarily one that I go back to often.
I can't imagine anyone would. I mean, it's a pretty depressing, melancholy story throughout.
It's very upsetting to me, especially the part when everybody comes into his room and humiliates him, and when Bites comes back in and takes him away. I mean, that was so upsetting watching it the first few times when I watched this, before, that tonight when I rewatched it, I was just like, I have to fast forward through this because this is just awful. I cannot stand watching this scene again. It's really heartbreaking. No,
it is. And that's where we need to kind of talk a little bit about the reality versus the fiction. So from what I read, from what I watched, because I watched a couple documentaries, I'm not sure that, the character of Bites in the movie is like a terrible person.
Oh, yeah.
But in real life, the person he's based off of, Tom Norman, it didn't seem like that was the case. And
it's like he's supposed to be a really good guy.
Yeah, and in some of the documentaries I watched, because there's a fair amount on YouTube, and I'll link them in the podcast description. One of them, they follow a descendant of Joseph Merrick, who was I think Joseph Merrick's cousin's family descendants. And they talk about how Joseph Merrick willingly went and allowed himself to be in the freak show because he knew he could make money, and he was making good money doing that until the people of England started to get upset about that being possibly exploitative. And then his ability to make money dried up. And that to me is interesting because that completely shifts what this entire film's narrative is based on.
Yeah. I have the feeling that the other two screenwriters, now, so just to set the stage a little bit, and literally set the stage, because there was a stage play about the Elephant Man that was actually very popular at this time, and it's had revivals over the years. I remember a few years ago they were doing it. God, who was it? It was somebody.
Bradley Cooper.
Thank you. I was like, it was somebody pretty handsome. So yeah, it was a stage play at this time. It was very popular. I want to say even in 1982 there was an adaptation of the stage play for television. So it would have felt like that was ripping off Elephant Man the movie, but at that time,
Films got sued because of it.
Right. Yeah, because there's a disclaimer at the end that I didn't remember ever seeing before, where it was just like, this is not based on the play.
Right, we are doing something called the Elephant Man completely side from that.
Right. And so this being when it was, I'm trying to remember what I was about to say as far as all this stuff. Shit. Where were we coming from with that?
We're talking about the truth and fiction of the...
Oh, okay.
And Berggren and
right.
And
so my opinion is that DeVore and Berggren, who were writing partners and would go on to do other things like Francis and a couple other films together, I imagine that they probably said, let's do something that's like the stage play. Maybe they even wrote it before the stage play. I don't know. But that probably put heat on their screenplay. It was optioned, and then they said, we need a director, and then it was actually offered to a couple other people, and then Lynch got signed on to it. So I think that that's how all of this stuff probably happened. But yeah, there was a swirl of Elephant Man stuff in the early 80s, which is just such a bizarre thing to think of.
Well, and again, I haven't gotten a chance to read the stage play, and I wanted to. It's just one of those things, I just didn't get around to it before we did this. I'm curious how different it is, because I'm assuming it's probably close to this, but maybe, look, here's the thing about this. This is admittedly one of the reference points they're using is Frederick Treves' The Elephant Man and Other Reminiscences, and then Ashley Montague's The Elephant Man, A Study in Human Dignity. So those things that they're using, we know that Frederick Treves' book of his account is very romanticized. And if that's super romanticized, it comes through in the film because there is that scene where Anthony Hopkins, who's fantastic, we haven't even talked about the fact that Anthony Hopkins is in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
He's sitting there and his wife comes in and she's like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I'm pondering whether or not I'm any better than Mr. Bites, played by Freddie Jones. He's like, am I any better? Because I'm essentially letting people come and see him just like Mr. Bites was. Am I any better? And she's like, no, you're a good man. You're giving him somewhere to live. And like that, in my mind, is like a very telling scene that this is so romanticized.
Yeah, I mean, because if you're just watching the movie and you're like, okay, yeah, this is pretty bad, it's almost like he's on display again. But then when he actually comes out and says that, it's like, oh, come on. That was a little too on the nose for me, please.
Yeah, it feels a little too, like, self-aware.
Yeah, I mean, but then again, you do have Anthony Hopkins delivering it, and that really carries some weight. He is fantastic in this movie.
Yeah, so I like John Hurt in this movie a lot. I think John Hurt is great. He does a lot with what he's given, and working underneath all that makeup and that heavy head prosthetic that he was working under could not have been easy, and he's very convincing. He's very sympathetic as John Merrick. But Anthony Hopkins is also fantastic. He's really, really good. It was kind of surprising. I mean, again, I don't really put a lot of stock into the Academy Awards, but I was surprised that he didn't get nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
Yeah.
Right? Because he's really good in this movie.
Well, he would have his time 10 years later with Silence of the Lambs, so...
A movie he's in for,
right,
12 minutes or something.
It's basically the John Merrick character there.
Yeah. But I love the character of John Merrick in this movie, and I love the design of the character. Especially even when it's like outside of the makeup, when he's like has the bag over his head and he's like walking around, like that is so iconic. Like you probably know that even if you've never seen this movie.
Yeah, that looks really good. The bag, just the way it looks like it hurts when Hurt moves. It just, yeah. Though I have to say, Freddie Jones, I love him as Bites. It's not like he's necessarily evil, and he's like this abusive father type role. And you're totally right as far as Dexter Fletcher being such an important part of this, because he is literally saying the exact same words that Bites says, and then he being the one that lets Merrick go free at the end. He's the most dynamic character of every single character in this film.
Yeah. Well, and again, with Freddie Jones's character, I kind of like knowing what I know about just a cursory amount of research into the reality of this. The character of Bites, like, he serves his purpose in the movie, but it's like kind of also a little unnecessary, right? Because like you could
it's like you have the night porter and you have Bites. It's like you should maybe have one villain or the other, but when the two of them come together, it's like, oh no, this is awful.
Yeah.
But I love Freddie Jones, and I loved his relationship with David Lynch. I always loved when he showed up in things. I mean, him as Thufir Hawat in Dune, or the Pigeon Man in Wild at Heart. He's just always on top when it comes to him. Well, I mean, I love him in other things as well, but when he was in Lynch stuff, I especially thought he was fantastic.
And he also is the father of Toby Jones, who, I mean, what can you say about Toby Jones? What can't you say about Toby Jones is probably more the...
He's very tall.
Yeah, what can't you say about him? He's American. Things you can't say about Toby Jones in one sentence. He's tall and he's American. Yeah, no, so here's the thing. As much as I kind of find that character to be wholly unnecessary, I find his, like you said, it's either his character's unnecessary or Michael Elphick's character of the Night Porter Jim is unnecessary. I feel like the Night Porter's character is more necessary because it advances like more of the plot. I don't know. Like I agree with you that I don't think they're both necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I have a bigger problem with Freddie Jones's character because he's based off someone that wasn't like that at all. And like that in and of itself just feels like really like you needed the antagonistic kind of, what's the Stromboli character, I guess, is kind of from Pinocchio. I mean, it's kind of that, right? Like, come see my fucking show, or like the kind of demented Mr. Barnum, but like, yeah, he's not really that evil. I mean, he kind of is. He beats the shit out of Joseph Merrick, but like, you take that away, he's just like, I'm trying to make money, and he said we could make money together, which was the reality of the situation. I think that's probably the bigger issue, right? Is they don't really make it clear. They have him say it, but they don't make it very clear that in reality, Joseph Merrick actually was okay with it, because he knew that was the only way he could make money, because he tried to go do other things and people like opened their door when he was trying to sell them stuff, and they'd be like, holy shit, fuck no, and they would close the door in his face.
Yeah, and I don't know why he doesn't necessarily bring up to anyone at the hospital that the night porter's such a shit to him.
Yeah, that also doesn't, like, there's some, like, that makes no sense to me, right? It doesn't, like, why wouldn't he just say, like, this guy is coming into my room at night with women and other people and, like, harassing me?
Right. And when he comes by and he knocks on the glass and it's just like, hey, coming up, I'm okay. And it's strange, too, because at one point he's like, oh, yeah, they're moving him from this place to this place, and that's when we'll come in. And I don't know if that ever really happens. It seems very arbitrary when he finally takes all those people into Merrick's room.
Well, it seems like it has to happen at the specific time because the plot says it needs to happen.
That's true.
Right? Like, he has to have Bites be in that bar and go and kidnap him. Which that whole thing also feels like completely tacked on. It resolves so quickly. It feels like that whole time could have been cut out and this movie could have been fine. I mean, they did that so that they could have the, I am not a animal, I am a man, like that whole like speech, that monologue, like that's why that exists, is to get to that point, because that did actually happen. But it just feels like padding out the length of the film.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, the last time you and I talked about David Lynch, we talked about Inland Empire, which is over 3 hours long. That seems to move faster than The Elephant Man does at times. The Elephant Man is a very determined pace, and let's just say it's a little slow.
It's a little slow, but the first 40 minutes go by pretty fast. Like, I remember like scrolling over the bar when I was watching and being like, oh, it's like almost an hour in. Like, this movie's moving at a pretty good clip. But kind of once he gets into the hospital and that whole kind of relationship starts to build with him and Anthony Hopkins, and they're like, we want to kick him out, but no, and more of the night porter stuff, like, yeah, it just kind of slows down. It seems kind of like it's spinning its wheels. Like, they don't really let the character continue to grow any, because it feels like once he kind of starts saying the Lord's Prayer, he's already kind of where he is at the end of the movie. Which is unfortunate, because like they have this interesting character that they really could have mined more. If you're going to go off of quote-unquote reality, if you're going to leave reality at the door and go more fiction, you could have really mined more of the kind of existential, internal struggle of this character. Yeah,
I mean, because there are moments where they're like, Sir John Gielgud is like, you can't imagine, imagine what it would have been like to be him, be self-aware, and be in this sideshow, and just what a horrible existence it was. And Anthony Hopkins is like, oh yeah, I can imagine. He's like, no, I don't think you can imagine. I don't think anybody can imagine. Well, maybe mine that a little bit more. Maybe give us like even some flashbacks or something, because we don't necessarily get that insight. We are also thinking, wow, it must have been really hard for him, but we don't get the true terror of that, I don't think.
Yeah. Well, it feels like they try to go back to it at the end of the movie.
Right. And
they should have maybe just front-loaded it more. Like, show more of Merrick in the sideshow traveling around. Because, again, if reality is of no matter to you, then you can make the story whatever you please. And you can really punch up the romanticizing of the character's life. And they kind of missed that chance. They also missed the chance, in my mind, to really build a relationship between him and Anne Bancroft. They have, like, one scene together.
Yeah. I was really hoping there would be more of him going to the theater, because she talks about how it's a place where, basically you see these things on stage and you can have this whole life outside of yourself, and him being trapped in this prison of his own body. I thought that him going to the theater at least one more time would have been something really remarkable. We really could have mined that for dramatic gold.
Yeah, but instead we get the ending is so abrupt.
Yeah.
The ending is, and then he consciously makes the decision in the film. In reality, that wasn't the case, I don't think. But again,
Well, and then there's that throwaway line of like, does he know that he's dying?
Right.
It's like, well, what's he dying of?
Yeah, I think it says, again, and it just says on Wikipedia, it says chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. But like, it doesn't say that in the movie. It's just like, does he know he's dying? Like, but does he?
Yeah. I mean, if he did, maybe then, yeah, it was a conscious choice. But yeah, it's a little sloppy. And I don't blame David Lynch for that. I blame the screenplay for that.
No, and that's the thing about this movie that I think is the weird thing, is if you had given David Lynch really the ability, like the freedom to do what he wanted with it, I think we would have had a much more interesting movie. Mm-hmm. But the thing about Joseph Merrick killing himself in the movie, because it's essentially like acknowledged suicide, because he's like, well, if you sleep like a normal person with your head on a pillow, you are going to kill yourself. Right. You are going to do something, dislocate your neck, close your windpipe, which is what happened in real life. The autopsy at the time said that he died of a dislocated neck. And the Treves said that he was experimenting to try to sleep like other people, normal people. So that's not like, that means that then he wasn't even, he didn't kill himself on purpose. Maybe he did. I think that honestly is an interesting kind of final point to the movie where it's like he makes that decision. But yeah, you're right. If they had really played more into that idea that he knows that his time is running out, but they don't even mention it. They just mention it. They mention it, but they don't like you're not feeling like the character is aware of that, which is weird. Yeah.
To me, the best parts of this movie are when they are the most Lynchian, like that opening, like the dream sequence, like the end. Those are the moments where I'm just like, okay, this is Lynch at his game, and this is fantastic. And then those other moments, which are just Hopkins walking around London and experiencing the Industrial Revolution, hearing those sounds, hearing the factory noises. Those are fantastic to me.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The parts of this movie that I really like are the same parts you like. But again, that's not surprising when those are the things that David Lynch excels at. He doesn't excel at telling this kind of story, because this kind of story isn't written by him. And look, there are a lot of directors out there that are considered auteurs. You've got someone like Scorsese, someone like Spielberg. A lot of those guys are taking other people's works and putting them on the screen. David Lynch is a screenwriter and a director, which is a very rare auteur, like class of your own thing. I liked this movie, but I would agree 100%. It's so un-Lynchian in the parts that I don't like that I wish that the parts that I did like were more of, which would mean this would need to have been a David Lynch movie throughout.
Yeah, I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about the Street Story, because I believe he did write that one. I mean, that one just feels more him to me. And that one, again, it really centers on one particular performance. Also, very, very strong supporting performances, but it's not nearly as Lynchian as anything I've seen. Though I have to admit, I've only seen it the one time.
Well, I'm excited to watch it because it's a Buena Vista film. It's a Disney film made by David Lynch.
Right? How strange is that even just to say out of your mouth?
Right. Saying a Disney film made by David Lynch who made Inland Empire, which was our 300th episode, which is a fucking 3.5 hour movie. David Lynch who made Twin Peaks. David Lynch who's made all these really surreal things, so much so that there is a term for his kind of film, made a Disney film. Well, to me, as weird as that is, it's also weird to say David Lynch made a biopic.
Right.
Because that's what this is. And even though The Straight Story is also a biopic because it's also about the real life of someone, it's more weird to me that he made a Disney film in that case. This is weird that he made, again, what is ostensibly a straightforward biopic.
Mm-hmm.
And those weird parts feel tacked on, which is unfortunate, but they're necessary to really give you an idea of what this could have been if it had been David Lynch all the way.
Right. So I did look. The Straight Story was co-written by John Roach and Mary Sweeney. And Mary Sweeney is a familiar name as far as she's been involved with Lynch for so many years, producing and doing other things on his films.
Well, and, that's not surprising because that came out in the mid-2000s, right?
Right. And I double-checked. It's not The Naked Gun, but is an episode of Police Squad, which inspired the Naked Gun movies. And that's when he's getting his Frank Drebin's getting his teeth cleaned, so he's got all of these things sticking out of his mouth, and the dentist is like, what, you're some kind of an animal? And then Drebin gives the whole, I'm not an animal, I'm a human being.
Is that a one-season show?
Yeah, it's one of the best one-season shows ever made because it is so fucking hilarious. It was too funny for TV. I
want to watch it now. I mean, everyone has seen that outro where it all freezes except for the criminal, and the criminal runs off when they're all supposed to be frozen at the end of the show. So that's pretty great. But
it is. I love that show. It is so good.
I mean, I quote Naked Gun, the actual film, all the time. So I feel like I would that just because that's where that came from. That was the inspiration. There you go.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was, I like to be really super smug about things. So when I saw Naked Gun, I was just like, okay, that joke was in Police Squad. That joke was in Police Squad. But I'm one of however many people that remembered watching Police Squad because nobody fucking watched it. And ABC was determined to kill the show. That they just kept moving it around and stuff and just did all of these things to basically make it so nobody could see the show. So me going oh, that was in Police Squad. It's just go, shut up, fat kid. Nobody saw that show except for you idiot.
I must kill the queen.
That was not in there.
And award-winning singer Enrico Palazzo.
But things like, is this some kind of a bust? Yes, ma'am. Very impressive. Those kind of things. Yeah, it was only 6 episodes.
What am I supposed to do when I see a bunch of weirdos in the park stabbing someone? Frank, that was Shakespeare in the park! Oh, man. Oh, jeez.
You know what's even better about Police Squad than Naked Gun? No O.J. Simpson.
Oh, right. I always forget about that whenever I turn it on. I'm like, oh, right. O.J. is in this movie. Yeah. Yikes.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't do it, folks. But if he did...
I'm hoping that one of these days he finds the real killer, because he swore that he would try.
It's kind of hard when you're just looking in the mirror. I'm going to find the real killer one day. And then your reflection looks at you and goes, boy, that CTE really fucked you up.
Whatever you do not ever show this man a mirror.
Right. Oh, God. So back to The Elephant Man. What would you give David Lynch's second film out of 5?
I'd give it 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I would give it 4... bags over my head out of 5. It's an interesting, I would say it's a fun movie, but it's an interesting movie, and I liked it. I really liked it a lot. I don't like biopics, because biopics for the most part suck. They're very formulaic, and this movie is pretty formulaic. I mean, there's a rise and a fall, and there's a rise again, and then the character dies. As any good biopic shows you, the character always dies at the end. So... okay, I take that back. Not always, but most of the time. Because I know someone's going to be like, well, not in this one.
Elton John didn't die in Rocket Man.
Dexter Fletcher directed that movie. You fucking idiot. You mentioned it in this podcast. Okay, fine. Calm down. Don't be so smug, internet commenters. Jesus Christ.
So he did that one, not the Bohemian Rhapsody.
No, he did Bohemian Rhapsody and Rocket Man.
And Rocket Man? He did both of those?
Dexter Fletcher was the one who was brought in once Singer walked away because, he rapes kids. And I don't think he directed enough to get full directing credit, so him and Singer share it.
Wow.
Doesn't that suck?
Yeah. And he's also going to be doing Sherlock Holmes 3, which I know I've been clamoring for the last few years.
Boy, that's a lie.
I actually like the first. Well,
oh, you
I
were
like
being
the
serious.
first one. I like the first one. The second one, I really haven't gone back to.
I like the first one. The second one, I don't remember. I know that Jared Harris plays Moriarty.
Yeah,
which is cool because Jared Harris is a great actor.
Jared Harris is really good, though.
Did anyone see fucking Chernobyl? The best thing on TV the entire goddamn year? Dude, Ukraine. Ukraine in the fucking media this year, dude. What is up with that?
Yeah, it's a big year for Ukraine.
Maybe the president's getting impeached because of Ukraine.
Could be.
So let's take a break and we'll play a preview for the next Culture Cast.
A beginning is a very delicate time. Know then that it is the year 10,191. In this time, the most precious substance in the universe is the spice melange. The spice extends life. The spice exists on only one planet in the entire universe. The planet is Arrakis, also known as June.
You are about to enter a world where the unexpected.
Many dangers exist on Arrakis.
The unknown. An incredible secret has been kept on this planet. And the unbelievable meet. I see two great houses feuding. Where kingdoms are built on earth that moves.
But we have one sign the likes of which even God has never seen.
And skies are filled with fire.
The prophecy which will cleanse the universe and bring us out of darkness.
Where a young warrior is called upon to free his people. A world that holds creation's greatest treasure.
He who controls the spice controls the universe.
And greatest terrors. A world where the mighty.
This is genocide. The deliberate and systematic destruction of all life on Arrakis.
The mad.
I will kill him!
I will love you forever.
And the magical.
Father, the sleeper has awakened!
Will have their final battle.
Long live the fighters!
Do not show the slightest pity or mercy!
Emperor, we come for you!
Dune, a spectacular journey through the wonders of space and the mysteries of time. From the boundaries of the incredible to the borders of the impossible. Now, Frank Herbert's widely read, talked about, and cherished masterpiece comes to the screen. Dino De Laurentiis presents Dune, a world beyond your experience, beyond your imagination.
So, on the next Culture Cast, I wish we were talking about the Dune film directed by Alejandro Jodorowsky. In another alternate universe, that happened. I would love to visit that universe. Instead, we were talking about David Lynch's Dune. And we're going to talk about not only Dune, but also the quote-unquote director cut, which is the original, and then the extended version of the film, which is awful.
Shut your fucking mouth, man. I love that movie.
I'm just kidding. The like extended version is just as good as the normal, but David Lynch hates the extended version.
Well, there's I collect fan edits of Dune, and there was an edit out there, I can't remember the name of it, but basically they went in and they rotoscoped all those eyes of all the Fremen to make them the blue within blue, and it looks like the real movie. I mean, they did a fantastic job of fixing up all that additional footage and integrating it back into the film. I love Dune. I watch that movie at least once a month. It is so good.
I like it a lot. It is, in my mind, it's like a distillation of everything that David Lynch has ever done in like a way that feels more approachable somehow for people. Because like, it is weird, but like, it's not super duper weird.
No, but it was too weird for people when it came out. Right. I mean, I'm sure in your research you'll find that they gave out things in the theater.
Like placards, like things to explain who they are. Exactly. And then that's why the extended version that David Lynch hates has like essentially 10 minutes of expository dialogue.
Yeah. That's why I like the fan edits a lot more, because they'll cut that stuff out. And Irulan actually has a whole lot more dialogue at the beginning, and that covers a lot of the stuff that they try to do in that opening voiceover with all the production photos that they add sound effects in the VO to.
Yeah, that stuff at the beginning is not good, and I understand why David Lynch doesn't like it, because it kills the film like out of the gate. It just like kneecaps the movie from the get-go, because it's like, and here's 10 minutes of dialogue, like 10 minutes of expository dialogue, like, oh my God, like, just get to the fucking movie. Like, I don't even care if I don't understand. So, but next week we're talking about that. I am joined by Jess Byard. She's never seen it before, which I can't wait to hear what she thinks about it.
Oh, I am so jealous.
I mean, if you want to be on it, you can. I don't care. I mean, like, if you love this movie so much, I feel like I'm doing you a disservice by not having you on it.
Oh, it's so good.
Okay, so we'll talk about this off podcast if you're going to be on it, if you have the time. Until then, if people hear you on the next podcast, they'll know you had enough time. If not, Mike's a busy man being so smug all the time. And where can people find you being so smug, Mike?
It takes so much energy to be as smug as I am. You can find me over at the Projection Booth, which is available at projectionboothpodcast.com. And if you listen soon, you'll hear the very last episode of the podcast that Chris and I have been doing for the last 3 years, the Kolchak tapes.
It's the end of an era. We're moving on to Rankin on Bass, where we talk about Rankin and Bass movies with our friend Richard, who apparently writes bad TV shows. So, you know, we're just just three peas in a shitty pod together. Oh, no. But, and you can find me here. You can find me on the Chronicles from the Crypt podcast. You can find me on Dreams for Sale. It's still happening. We just need to find time to record it.
Really? It is?
If it's not happening with him, it's happening with someone else, because I'm already invested. We're too invested. I don't know where else. You can find me all over the place, casualty_Chris on Twitter, culturecast.com. Big thanks as always for the intro outro music. Catch you on the next episode.